you are living paycheck to paycheck and you are constantly stressed. You're afraid of whatever could happen next just because you don't have that peace of mind.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash that like button and click subscribe. For those of you listening on a podcast platform, be sure to subscribe on whatever platform that is and leave us a rating if you can. The more likes, ratings, and subscriptions that we get, the more we can spread the message and grow our community. So we also have a free Facebook group. It's called the Average Joe Finances Network. Check us out, join the group, join the community, ask questions, and become a part of the team. All of our other social media accounts are listed in our flow page, and we have them in the video or podcast description below. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Average Joe Finances podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavaggioni, and today's guest, and I had a lot of fun trying to pronounce her name before we started, so I'm gonna get this right though. Okay, it's Ida Azefor Eyong. I'm super excited to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today.
It's such an honor to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny because we connected through a podcasting group, and, it was great to just connect with somebody who's almost talking about the same exact stuff that I'm talking about, but you're doing it just a little further north than me up in Canada. Well, actually, I guess it's more like way east since I'm in Hawaii now, but yeah, it's really exciting to have somebody on the show that does some very similar to me, especially with financial coaching. And I'm just super excited to talk with you. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself and your story. How did this all get started for you when you moved to Canada? What made you want to start your own business?
So when I moved to Canada, that was in 2010. I came to this country because I was an accountant back home in Cameroon. And I was working in a multinational firm, in a multinational company, and I was the accountant there. So when I was coming here, and plus I came under the skilled worker program. When I was coming here, in my mind, I was going to come and just crush it and be an accountant in one of the big four firms, right? But then I got here and it was like, oh, this is not what I signed up for. I got here and the first thing is, even though you have that accounting experience, they're like, you don't have Canadian experience. So you cannot get into an accounting job as you thought you could. So for me, it was getting to this place and realizing that those dreams that I had in my mind, it wouldn't play out exactly as I had planned. I started working in a call center and it was miserable for me. Coming in there with my very strong African accent at the time and trying to learn the way things are done here, the way people talk here and everything else. And working in a call center at the time was like, for me, it was like torture. And I had always wanted to get back into accounting. And well, eventually, within the same first year that I was here, I eventually got into an accounting job, but I accepted a pay cut in order to get into that job. But for me, it was just to get in there and get the Canadian experience. So when I got in there, I started learning all the things that I could learn on the spot. And a few years down the road, I had my first child and I went on mat leave. And then when I came back, I had to go again on mat leave. Here in Canada, you go on mat leave for like 12 months. So within a 3-year period, and it's paid 12 months off, right? So within the 3-year period, I had been away for like 2 years. And when I came back, the person that I had trained to take over what I was doing got so good at what she was doing that it was like my spot wasn't there anymore. And my options were like come back part-time and take this, whatever is available here. And then we're going to see what happens down the road, or get a severance pay and move on. And well, I kind of weighed my options. I really wanted to keep doing that. But I was like, you know what? I want to be able to control my schedule. I want to be able to do things a little bit differently, just because now I'm a mom and I'm going to need a lot of time off and, personal time, which doesn't quite work well when you're doing a 9-to-5 at the time. So I decided, instead of coming back to the company and instead of coming back to the company and being a subordinate to the person that I trained, I would rather be on my own and do the same thing. And it turned out that this company that I used to work for, they became my first client because I decided to go on my own and they became my first client. Well, I started that company in 2014, which was 4 years after I got here. And I pretty much did the same thing that I was doing at the company at the time. I started doing that on my own. I kind of filled this spot because the company I was working at was doing accounting and bookkeeping services for small businesses as well. And I had gone ahead and had learned a new software, which a lot of people, I think it's QuickBooks Online. I'm not sure if you know that. But at the time, a lot of people were beginning to get into this new system. So I learned it on my own and I was able to start helping a lot of small businesses with that. But fast forward till now, I actually have gone back to doing a 9 to 5 because, again, coming into a new country, you go into all the financial mistakes that everybody makes. You go into credit cards, you go into car loans, you go into every single thing, and you get yourself in a position where it's like you have to do something extra in order to get yourself to a place where you want to be. So that's like a brief overview of me coming here back to.
Okay, yeah, right on. That's super exciting. You know, it's kind of crazy because you found yourself in a new country and you had to essentially almost learn everything over again because it's a new country, different culture. People talk a different way, right? So you got to that call center and you said basically it was like a nightmare for you, right? And you had to get your Canadian experience up, right? Because you had a thick accent, and so there was probably like a small language barrier there, right? Especially working in a call center, so that had to be pretty, I guess, mentally taxing on you, I would say, right? But, as you fast forward and you got to the point where you go on maternity leave, you got somebody else trained up. This was in the next part of the job, right? So this wasn't the call center anymore.
No, that was at the accounting firm that I was for, the accounting job. Yeah.
Yeah. So you train this person up, you go on maternity leave, you come back, and essentially your job's not there, right? It is, but it's like part-time now, and you're working for the person that you trained. Like that's got to be like almost like a slap in the face. Maybe probably the downside to the wonderful maternity leave program that most Canadian companies give, right? Is that you might come back and somebody else like took your job essentially,
which is technically illegal, but I didn't want to fight that. I was just like, you know what, I got a lot going. I have things that I want to do, and I'm not just going to sit here and fight for a position that's like you're not wanted in, essentially. So it's like,
and it creates like a more like a hostile environment, right? Because if they were already like telling you, oh, we'll let you go, you can take a severance. Do you really want to be there anymore at that point?
Exactly.
So, yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's just really interesting side of your story, and I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you sharing that because it was a lot of life-changing experiences in a very short period of time for you, right? Moving to a new country, having your first child. Well, actually, so moving to a new country, starting a new career, moving to a new job after that, having your first child, coming back, losing that job. It's just a lot going on, but you didn't just give up. You kept moving on and you started your own business and had that same company come to be your client, which is absolutely awesome.
Yes.
So with your background and what you do, like, so, you're an accountant, you're also a financial coach. I want to kind of go down this road with you here, right? Because this is kind of in the wheelhouse of what we talk about on this podcast. So I want to ask you what you would say is the reason why financial literacy is important.
Financial literacy is very important because unfortunately, it's something that is not taught in schools, unfortunately. And we do have, I was listening to you talk to Michael Gilmore, and he actually talked about the fact that now we do have financial inclusion, but the education part is not there. And no matter how much money you have, if you're not financially literate, you're never going to get to your goal, which is, at the end of the day, everybody wants to be happy. You want to be able to do what you want to do for as long as you want to do it, right? And that to me is what financial independence is all about. You getting to that point in your life where you're able to do what you want to do for as long as you want to do it and with the people you want to do it with. If you're not able to, at the end of the day, when you're doing that, that's what gives you fulfillment. That's what gives you a sense of purpose. And so for you to be able to do that, you need to be able to understand how money works. You need to be able to put yourself in a position where you're not stressed out about money so that you can go ahead and do those things.
Yeah, no, I love that. That is spot on because, financial literacy, it's not about getting rich and being super wealthy and having the flashy car and everything like that. It's about what do you get back from it by being financially literate? You learn how to better manage your finances. And by being able to better manage your finances, there's a lot of things that you get back from that. One of them being time. And you get that time back because everything costs money. Everything costs money. Your time costs money. If you're spending your time doing something that doesn't bring value to yourself or those around you, then essentially you're wasting that time, right? But at the same time, and when I say value, it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary, right? If I'm hanging out with my family and I'm enjoying that time with my family, that brings value, if you ask me, to me and to my family. That's important, right? If I'm just sitting around and scrolling on TikTok for a couple hours, that really doesn't bring value, right? If I'm scrolling through TikTok and I'm watching content of like business content and other entrepreneurs and stuff in their small little snippets, that can kind of bring value, but most of the time, those short videos are just hooks to try to get you into something bigger. So I do love like online content and stuff like that. I am a social media sponge, but at the same time, you still got to be really careful with that. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Financial literacy, it's more of having a better understanding of freedom, I would say, right? Because once you understand that, you can understand what it's truly like to be free and do stuff that you enjoy. Now, getting into financial literacy, there's a lot of people, again, like you said, it wasn't taught in school. It's just not something that's typically taught in the public or private school sector. And, that's where, as adults, as people move on in life, they've got to get their financial literacy from somewhere. And, a lot of people will find it on social media, which is great. But a lot of people do other things. They'll sign up for different programs and things like that. And myself also being a coach, I help other people get there. So I wanted to ask you, because you got yourself into financial coaching, right? So you were already an accountant as it was for like bigger firms, an international company in Cameroon, and then coming over to Canada and doing it here, there as well. What made you want to kind of step outside of that and be, a financial coach to help individuals instead?
The thing is, I realized that despite my background, despite being an accountant, there were things that I didn't know, which seemed to be obvious things that I should know, but I didn't know. So I asked myself, like, if with my background, I don't know those things, what about the people who don't even have the kind of background that I do? And what about the people who don't even know where to look? And what about the people who would actually look and cannot tell the difference between good financial advice and bad financial advice? So for me, it was actually just putting myself in the position where I want to be the person who is bringing this information to people like me, people who, for example, came from another country and they're starting fresh in this side of the world where you get access to money, you get access to credit, you get access to things that you don't necessarily have not necessarily been a part of your past, or getting access to, for example, credit where you could spend money you don't have, which again goes back to that inclusion part of it. I wanted to be the person my purpose is really just to help people understand how money actually works so that they can avoid the kind of mistakes that we make just by having access to funds that we have, like just by having access to funds that is not ours, through the credit system and through all of that. So it's just for me wanting to be the person stepping in the gap to help my community, essentially.
Yeah. Just a good way to give back to others. And, so I'm sitting here taking notes as you're talking, right? And, one of the things you mentioned is that, for some people, it's about, they don't know where to look, right? And for those that do know where to look, a lot of times, they can't tell the difference, whether it's good financial advice or poor financial advice. And the other thing you talked about too is just like the actual access to money and credit and things like that. A lot of people don't understand how to get that. And just it's funny, like after doing this for a little while, like some of the things that I talk about on my show, I'm like, well, how do you not know about this stuff? This is pretty basic stuff. And then I think back to, when I was younger and I'm like, well, I didn't really know this stuff when I was their age either, and being able to, especially being able to help younger people understand this, you can really help people set up their future to be in a much better place. I think it's super important. The other thing that you said too was about that inclusion, right? That financial inclusion, that this is stuff that anybody can really have access to, but a lot of times you'll see in certain communities that it's just not there because the education piece isn't there. So by you doing what you're doing, you're providing that gateway, that access to this financial literacy, to this wealth of knowledge to build wealth, which is really awesome. So I want to say that I definitely appreciate that. And your reason for doing it, your why, is like the best thing that I could, even think of when it comes to why you'd want to do something like this. You want to be that bridge and build that gateway because it's something that you took personal on yourself because you were in that same position not too long ago. And even with the accounting background information that you already had, basic things that you just didn't understand. And you had said that you had made like some of like the basic financial mistakes when you first came over, right? So I'd like to touch on that a little bit. Like, what is it that when you first moved to Canada, like what kind of financial mistakes did you make that, that you really learned from and grew from?
The first one being credit cards. I mean, I used to be a person who would say, don't use a credit card at all. But I have kind of modified that to say, understand what a credit card is, understand how it works before you use it. For me, getting into this country, it was people around me telling me, hey, you need to build a credit score, which is good advice, but nobody tells you how to do that or the good way to do that. So the simple advice I got was go to the bank, request a credit card, and make sure you use it. And that's what I started doing. And every time the first time the bank put up, because here in Canada, the bank is just going to put something in your profile to tell you you're eligible for a credit limit increase. Do you want it? And again, being a new person, I never knew what that was. So I would ask the people around me, hey, the bank is telling me I'm eligible for an increase. Should I take it? And they would say, yes, always accept a credit limit increase. That's what they said. So that's what I did. I started off with $1,000 credit card. It was a secured credit card because, again, coming over here, I had no credit history, right? So I had to put down $1,000 in order for the bank to give me $1,000 credit card. So I put it down and then they gave me the card. I think it was like after a year that the funds were released because now they were able to see that I have been using the money and paying it off.
Yeah, you built up that credit worthiness to them.
Yes, exactly. But it took me from the time I got here, which was 2010, between then and like 2015, I had racked up about more than $20,000 in credit card debt. Yeah, seriously. Just by accepting the credit limit increase and then expanding my lifestyle because when the funds are there, it's like, oh, you have money, but you don't.
Yeah, you let that lifestyle creep up on you.
Exactly. So I would have that. And then there's a sale and your friends are going to say, hey, there's a sale. And of course, you have a credit card, just go use it. And we kept doing that. I kept doing that. And between then and 2015, I had racked up, I said, more than $20,000 in credit card debt. And I had more than 5 credit cards. So this one that would give you, it's like $9,000 in credit card. There's another one that's going to give you, it's like $15,000. And that's the limit, right? And so long as you could pay back the minimum, which is what everybody says, pay the minimum so you can stay, you would not default. You will not be in default. That's what I was doing. And that's the advice everybody is getting. So I racked that up. And then, so that was one mistake I made, right? But the other one too was the car. My first car, I actually bought it cash. It was like a $3,000 car just because I needed a car to go around. But I had the $3,000 and I paid for it. And the car started acting up and everything. So my friends just said, hey, just go to the dealership and get a new car. I'm like, but I don't have the money. And they said, it doesn't matter, just go get it. So I actually went ahead and I bought a new car. And I think I had like $8,000 in cash, which I said, I want to put $8,000 towards this car. And then the rest can be on financing. And the dealership was saying, no, we don't want your money. Just take the car. We don't want your money. So that's me. I took the car and I had $8,000 that I could use for anything else. But now that's how the debt started going up. And then a few years later, when the car started acting up again, I said, I wanted a newer car because I'm starting to spend a lot of money at the mechanics. So a few years down the road, I went again to the dealership and I said, I just wanted to trade this car and get a newer one just so I don't have to spend so much time at the mechanics. But guess what? I walked out of there with a brand new car because the payments were slightly lower or about the same as what my payments on the other car was. But what I didn't pay attention to was the fact that the payments were lower because it was spread over 7 years instead of 3 or 5 years as the previous one was. So that was me getting into more debt. But do you think I learned that at that time? No. Few years down the road, when I had my third kid, we tried to fit the car seats in the car and it didn't fit properly. So guess what? We went to the dealership and traded in the car for another new one. So by the time 2019 came around, we had more than $60,000 in bad debt between credit cards and cars. Cars are just kind of rolled into each other and just going up and going up. And for me, that was like, I was living my best life, right? I say this to my clients. I was living my best life on borrowed money. But getting to that point, it's like you're now at this place where you can't stop working because how are you going to make your minimum payments? You can't stop. You have to go to work. You can't call in sick. You don't have freedom anymore because you are in such a big mess that, if you stop working or if you pull back or anything, and you have to be extra nice to everybody around you, because if not, if you get fired, then what? So it puts me, or it put us in that kind of position where it's like you are living paycheck to paycheck and you are constantly stressed. You're afraid of whatever could happen next just because you don't have that peace of mind. So in 2019, I came across Dave Ramsey. I think you mentioned him in one of your episodes as well. I came across Dave Ramsey and I saw his information. I was like, oh my God, how come I never knew this stuff? He was one of the first people whose messages resonated with me. It made a lot of sense. It was hard to hear, but it was the truth. So from getting in contact with the people in his community and all of that, which said, okay, you know what? Enough is enough. 2019 is a year that we're going to start changing our lives. And so we made up our minds at that time, between my husband and I, we made up our minds at that time to say, okay, enough is enough. We're going to change our lives today. We're going to start now. And so we just got intense and we started paying off the debt and saying no to things and saying no to the kids and 360, changing everything about ourselves.
Yeah, that change is something that is just, not only did you change yourself, but you changed the trajectory of your life, right? And a lot of people find Dave Ramsey, and that's where that light bulb hits and switches for them. As a matter of fact, for me as well, when I was in severe debt, I had about $28,000 in credit card debt. I had other small personal loans, a car loan, everything else. I don't even add all that up. I don't even know what it was. It was some astronomical number. And, we got to the point where we're like, we really need to figure this out. And we started listening to Dave Ramsey and, started following his baby steps, right? And we did steps 1 through 3 to completely get out of debt. And then after that, I don't know if I like this anymore, because 1 through 3 is good, but the 4 through 7, I'm not sure. But, we paid off all of our consumer debt and it got us to a much better place. Credit score was phenomenal. And we were able to buy our second home when we moved to Hawaii with a lot of money in the bank, because we built up our emergency funds and also our savings account. But I think the key thing is you have to flip that switch, and it's discipline. You have to discipline yourself. And there was something that you said there. It's a key word that you said, and that key word was no, right? You had to know when to say no. And I know it's hard, right? You said you had to say no to yourself. You had to say no to your husband. You had to say no to your kids. There's just things that you have to say no to continue to move on, right? And to be able to get to that point where you're going to pay off all that debt, which is phenomenal. So key word here, guys that are listening, guys and gals, is no. Got to learn when to say no. All right. So
nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah, nobody. That is a lot of people's least favorite word. I know for my children, it's definitely their least favorite word. That's for sure. But sometimes you got to know when to say no, right? You have to know when to step back and say, this is probably not the best thing to do. And, you got yourself to the point where you learn those lessons, and you learn them the hard way, like most people do, right? You learned it by racking up debt. Yes. And, it's the same lessons that a lot of people learn, but, there's folks out there now, there's different education programs, there's different podcasts you could listen to, to learn not do that early enough to where you can actually save a lot of people a lot of time, money, and stress. But also for the folks that did rack that up, to show them that there is a way out. There is a way to beat this and a way to get past all that. So speaking of that, who are the people that, for you being a financial coach, who are the people that you want to help most and why?
So the people that I want to help most are people whose journeys are like mine. People who, because for the most part, if you're born here, if you've been here from the time you were small, you kind of know what credit is. You kind of know, you've heard about it. You've seen people being broke. You've seen things. But a lot of people like me who came to this country at a point in their lives when they're like adults, and you're at a point in your life where you're like, I can do whatever I want, right? Those are the people I really want to help the most, because this information is out there. But because you have probably believed a certain narrative about yourself from where you came from, the certain narratives you've believed about yourself, and you start to say, okay, no, yes, it's good that it happens for you, but it can't happen for me because I wasn't born here, or because I talk like this, or because I do this, or because I do that. You start to set those limitations for yourself because you think the people who are preaching this message are not like you. So I know that math is math. 1 + 1 is 2. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter how you talk. 1 + 1 is 2. So if you can simply believe that these things can happen to you, sometimes it's hard to believe that. But if you see somebody who's just like you, who's preaching this message and who is telling you, yes, you can do it, maybe it can resonate with you a little bit more. So the people I want to help the most are the people who are just like me, who came here with no knowledge of how the system works at all, and who are very likely going to make the same mistakes if they keep listening just to the people that are around them. Those are the people I want to help the most.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what a great message, right? Because again, I could sit here and preach this stuff all day, right? But like you're saying, I wasn't an immigrant. I didn't come here from another country. I didn't have to face some of the adversities that other people have to face, right? Where you have that other side of that story, and you could say the same thing I'm saying, but it'll resonate to them coming from you because you went through that. You're the same, right? You went through the same exact thing, and people can identify with that a little bit better coming from someone who's been in the same shoes as them in the past. Sure, I have my debt story, right? But I didn't immigrate from West Africa, to a country in Northern America to try to figure out and start a new life. Yes. You did, right? So other people that are going through that similar situation might be like, I don't know about that average Joe finances guy. He's just, another white guy preaching financial independence and freedom, right? But you have that same story as well. But you also have it from the perspective of somebody that stepped the same footsteps in that same journey. And I think that's absolutely amazing because they get to identify themselves within you, right? And I think that's super important. That's when we get to the whole financial inclusion piece, right? That it doesn't just have to be for a specific community or race or anything. Like it is, anybody can be involved in this. Anybody can do it. And it's just a matter of making sure that, it's that comfort level, right? Who's the person preaching this message to me? Is it somebody that I can't really identify with? Or is it somebody that like, wow, that's what I'm going through now, and she did it that same way? Maybe I should listen to her message. And that's where you get that breakthrough, and you get people that are going to respond and say, wow, and it's life-changing, right? You're going to be able to change people's lives by doing this. So speaking of, so you have a finance podcast as well, right? And by doing this, and by having your target community, like who you're trying to get this message out to, what is the actual goal of the podcast itself?
So the goal of the podcast is it's education. It's mainly education. And I call it the reason you're broke. And a lot of people, or some people like it and some people don't like it because people don't want to be told the truth, which is like, you're broke. I was broke. And I'm able to say that right now because I have come out of there, right? So it's kind of in your face, the reason you're broke. But at the same time, it's not just telling you why you're broke, but it's telling you what you can do about it. Using my story and using people I bring people from other communities. I bring people anybody who's willing to share their story. Just so, okay, you're hearing it from me and I'm like you, but this guy too, who's not even like you, is saying the same thing that I am saying. So, well, maybe there's something in there. So yeah, so it's really education. And I don't talk about investing there because I'm not there yet. I mean, there as in, yes, I'm investing, but I can't advise people on what to do because I haven't made all the mistakes that there are to make, right? But I could talk about the things I have done, how to pay off your credit card, what is RRSP, which to you guys is like the 401k and the Roth IRA. I explain all of those to people because essentially that's my journey. And if it's my journey, it is the journey of every other person who came like me, who's like me, who came here. And as I get to different stages in my life, my goal is to kind of continue to bring that message to the podcast so that people can also learn and improve themselves. So it's really about education, because to me, I believe that if you educate people, like give them the tools so that they can make decisions for themselves. Don't tell me to go and buy a stock. Tell me why I need to buy it. Don't tell me to go and invest in real estate. Tell me why I should invest in real estate so I can make that decision for myself. I think a lot of people just go with information like, okay, do this and do that. But why? So it's really about education so I can empower people from the ground up so they can know that, hey, this is out there. This is why it is out there. And maybe it's good for me. So maybe I'm going to take that into consideration.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I told you before in previous chats, like on Facebook Messenger and stuff like that, I absolutely love the name of your podcast. I think it's great. And yeah, I mean, I guess maybe, some people could get offended by it because it's like, well, I don't need somebody telling me I'm broke, but it's real. It's realistic. And the name says, there's a lot to it, right? I like the name of my podcast too, right? Average Joe Finances, right? We're here to show you that the average Joe or Jane can do this, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like with yours, like what I love about it is like the reason you're broke. Well, there are many reasons and your show explains that. And sometimes people need that kind of like that slap into reality to understand. So I like the realness behind it. And there's a lot to a name. And I think it's very clever. I love it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. So another question I have, right? So a lot of what a lot of people struggle with, and I know like for my wife and I, like we had to figure out like coming together. It's one thing when you're telling your story, right? And you're explaining it to an individual, but to those that are married or have a partner or something like that, sometimes it's tough if they're not rowing the same way that you are, right? And so how do you get yourself on the same page with your spouse or significant other or partner when it comes to money?
Good question. I think the challenge for most people is they try to tell their spouse, this is what we're going to do, without allowing them to get to the same place as you. Because by the time you're bringing information to your spouse to say, hey, we're going to pay off credit cards, you have had information or you have had a transformation in you that they haven't had. You're at a different place than they are. So it's important that even though you have this goal in your head of we got to pay off our credit cards now so that we can be financially independent, it's important that you get them to the same place as you, either by like little cues here and there. Because let's be real, nobody wants to be told what to do. Not to talk of an adult, nobody wants to be told what to do. But there are ways that you could talk to them to bring them in so that at the end of the day, they're actually the ones making that decision. And it's like it's their decision, but it was yours all along. So for me, the way it worked with my spouse was, I came across Dave Ramsey and his message really resonated with me. And so what I started doing was I started throwing a few things at him. So I was like, hey, I found this guy, check out this podcast. Or I found this message and check this out. Or, hey, I was listening to a podcast today and these people talked about how much debt they were in and they paid it off. And now they're doing this and they're doing that. So you start to get that excitement in them so that they can start to dream and they can start to say, hey, I would like that for myself. What can we do? Or, you would see a cue, you would see that they are receptive based on how you approach this. But you have to be very tactical about how you approach it, allowing them to dream. And then when you see how receptive they are, then of course, throw it in there. You know what? Let's do this. Or, hey, I put together Debt Snowball, for example. If we do what they did, we will be out of debt in X amount of years. Maybe we should give this a try. And then you let it be. And let them talk about it. If they don't follow through on that day, you know what? Bring it up again when you guys are in a good mood and just say, hey, do you think about what I showed you the other day? If you're still not receptive, Don't worry about it. Talk about another story you heard that's like inspiring to you. You just need to keep pushing it there, because at the end of the day, you need to think about what it is you want and be patient about it. You want to get out of debt. So don't get mad at him because he's not following right now. If you get mad at him because he's not following through right now, then it's like emotions start going all over the place.
Start pushing him away.
You start pushing him away, but your whole goal is about bringing him towards you to see with you. So just be tactical about it, I would say, and just allow the person to dream, allow the person to get to the same place where you are at, and then you guys can make this decision going forward.
Yeah, Ida, that's perfect. And it's like planting a seed, right? You got to plant that seed, and you got to keep watering it and watering it and watering it until it sprouts. Yes. Once it sprouts, then okay, hey, we're growing here. We've got growth. But like you said too, if you get to the point where, I guess, bring more emotions into it, or you pester or badger, it's almost like taking your finger and pushing that seed further down in the dirt, giving it so much more length for it to have to grow before it sprouts.
Yes.
Right. So I think that's super important. I really like that message for sure. So, okay. Yes. Get your partner on the same page. That is huge. You don't want to just jump into it. I can tell you, I've made that mistake myself. My wife and I got on the same page when it came to getting out of debt. Right. And we did that. And then, we wanted to buy our home in Hawaii. We did that. And I said, okay, now we're in this good place. I want to start investing in real estate. And she's like, I don't know about that. And I'm kind of like forcing the hand, and she's getting further and further away. So then I kind of just left it alone. And then I said, hey, I started listening to this and watching this. What do you think about this? And I started showing her different things. Right. So it's really funny that you said that, because I was like, this is exactly what I did to like get my wife into real estate investing with me. Right.
Yeah.
And, so I showed her some stuff from Bigger Pockets. And then I had some friends of mine who were investing in real estate. So I said, hey, let's go have lunch with them and just kind of chat about it a little bit. And literally that conversation that we had at lunch, she was like, okay, let's do it. And then we went and bought a duplex. So it was, it was pretty cool. But, it's not so much about the persistence. It's about, like you said, being tactful about it, right? You don't want to just keep badgering somebody. You have to find the right moments to bring up that topic of conversation, right?
Yeah.
That's the important thing. So, okay. So definitely get on the same page with your spouse. Don't just go and do something and ask for forgiveness later. It might wind up being even more financially stressful if you do it that way. So, okay. So now as a finance coach, what kind of services do you offer?
So I do one-on-one coaching, and I also do group coaching. But what I've found is that a lot of people are very shy in group setting. So it's mainly one-on-one coaching that I do. Actually, what I started not too long ago, is just like a couple of weeks now. I decided to put together a group of people who wanted to receive free coaching. But here's the catch. It's got to be live. And the whole purpose is to get people talking about money. Because in my community, money is like a taboo topic. Money is like, when you have beliefs rooted in you, certain beliefs about something, and you're trying to get people to a certain level, but you need to change that belief, the underlying belief first. Yes. So for me, I put together a group of people who want to receive one-on-one coaching, but it's going to be live, so that other people can get inspired by their story and their message and see that, hey, that person is just like me, and this lady has helped them. I want to get on that thing with them. So there's free coaching, which I do on Instagram Live, one-on-one, but there's one-on-one coaching, which I do like on a Zoom call like this. And then there's group coaching, which I do. So it could be like a group of people who belong to a certain association, see it's an alumni, or just a group of friends who are like, okay, we want to get on this thing together. It's just like, what's it called? People wanting to, like a buddy system, accountability partners. So they could say, okay, 10 of us together, we want to do this thing together. So you coach us. So it's that group coaching as well. But on the other side of it, I also do like personal taxes and corporate taxes, which is on the accounting side of things. So it's kind of bringing together my two worlds of my personal journey in debt, plus my background in accounting, and bringing all of that together.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love it. And I like the whole, what you're doing for the free coaching side too, right? You're like, hey, I'll do it for free with you, but we're going to do it live on Instagram. But it gets people talking, right? It gets people thinking about it. especially in the target community that you're trying to get, right? And it might seem trivial, but by doing little things like that, you are bringing so much value to that community and financial literacy itself. So that is absolutely phenomenal. And it's, I look at everything that you're doing and the value that you provide. And it's just, I kind of get taken back because you really are trying to change people's lives, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about coaching as well, is that you can actually help somebody build themselves up to get to the point where they can just be on their own and they're going to be okay and go out there and crush it. And you're really focusing on making like huge changes in communities, not just one-on-one, which you do that, right? But you're affecting change on a large scale. And people might not think of it that way. You might not even think of it that way. But when if you take a step back and take a look at what you're doing, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal work. So it's just awesome. Thank you for what you do for your community and for everyone else that you're helping. I mean, that's just really good stuff, Ida. I genuinely mean that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See, I'm blushing.
It's all good. Hey, look, I'm not just trying to hype you up or anything, because I really do mean that. Like, I think that's important. Unfortunately, there's not enough of that in the world today. But one of the things that I love about being in the personal finance community, but also even as a real estate investor as well, is I see so many people that are willing to give back and just help other people. I would say 97% of the people I talk to in these communities are always willing to share something or share a story or share some success and help other people out. I'm not saying that they'll hand walk people through things and give handouts. No, it's not that. But it's like, hey, they'll take the time to have a conversation with you and tell you how they did something or what they did to get there. And that just brings so much value that I think it gets underestimated a lot. So I just wanted to touch on that.
I find that too. And strangely enough, right, before having that mindset shift myself, I used to think that, which is exactly what the community thinks. Maybe it's not everybody who thinks that way, but the vast majority of people think that the wealthy are evil. Mm-hmm. And because of them having more, this group of people have less because this group has more. But that's not true. It's not. And to be able to get people to change that mindset is really hard.
Yeah.
But that's the place where I'm like, okay, if you can have that mindset shift to know that one person having more doesn't mean you get to have less. If you can have that mindset shift, then you stop seeing yourself as a victim and know that you can create the life that you want. So to be able to get that message across, that's really what I'm trying to do. And I'm hoping that I'm going to reach as many people as are willing to listen.
Yeah, that's super important. It's you have to know your audience as well, right? And you have to make sure that you're putting out the message that will resonate, right? That's super important. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. So keep doing what you're doing. It's absolutely amazing. Okay. So I have a set of questions I'd like to ask you. It's something I started asking everybody that I bring on the show. It's just 4 questions, but I think it's pretty impactful because it's going to touch into a lot of big things, I guess, deep rooted things. Right. So the first question I want to ask you is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made?
Credit card. Not about using credit cards, because I still use them, but right now I pay it off like right away, right? I wouldn't swipe my credit card if I don't have the money to pay it. I literally do a budget and like, okay, I'm going to spend $200 in the shop, for example. I have it and I'll go to the shop and I'll say, okay, swipe credit card, come back home, pay it off right away. So my biggest mistake was listening to people who said, underpay the minimum on your credit cards, because that's what started me on the downward journey into getting into debt. Yeah,
right on. All right, cool. Awesome. Yeah, that is a pretty big mistake. And I think that's one that a lot of people make. It's definitely one that I made myself as well, many, many, many times. So, okay, cool. So next question. What is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started this journey?
Something I have learned that I wish I knew when I first started this journey: compound interest. That if you start investing even $300 from about the age of 18 and put that every single month at about 8% or so, you're going to be a millionaire by the time you're, what age is that? 50?
Yeah,
maybe even before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I never knew that. Right. So it's living your best life on whatever money you make and just say, okay, the government is going to take care of me by the time I'm ready to retire. But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that is huge. Compound interest is, there's a reason why it's called the eighth wonder of the world, right?
Yeah.
Definitely a good lesson learned there. Awesome. All right, next question. Do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to somebody who's just getting started? So let's say somebody who is in debt right now and they want to get themselves to a point where they can pay off all this debt. What would you recommend to them?
The first thing would be distance yourself from your credit card. Not because credit cards are bad, but because you need to be able to not depend on it so that you can eventually start using it without it being like a thing you depend on. So, for example, if you get yourself to a point where you know you don't need your credit card, psychologically, something changes psychologically because it forces you to spend money you have, and it forces you to not get into unhealthy competition. Like you want to get things that everybody else has. So you're going to go use money, or you're going to, you're just going to spend anyhow, just because, So I'm going to tell people, first of all, distance yourself from your credit card. And the second thing is put aside at least 10% of your income, at least, ideally more, but at the minimum. That's something I learned from the richest man in Babylon, at least 10% of your income aside.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. As a matter of fact, the very next question, so I'm glad you mentioned that, right? But the very next question is, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast, or both?
Book would be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The very first one, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That would be my favorite one because he points out the fact that being like school essentially is it's designed to make you do a 9 to 5, but a 9 to 5 is never going to get you where you want to go. So it's about having that shift to know that, okay, just having a PhD or an MBA or whatever it is you've gone to school to study, that's not all that's going to get you where you want to go. You need lots of other things which are not taught in school. So you need to self-educate. You need to constantly be learning and improving yourself on other things which are not related to school, but you're still getting education.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's a great book, by the way. We call it the Purple Bible, right? Yeah. What about podcasts? Do you have a favorite podcast you listen to?
My favorite podcast is probably Tony Robbins. Yes, it's Tony Robbins because he doesn't only talk about money. I mean, he talks a lot about money, but not only that, he talks a lot about self-empowerment. He talks a lot about the psychology, and he talks about everything, but all of it is geared towards empowering you to make you a better person.
Yeah. And that's key. Like, cause it's not just about money, right? You need to, as an individual, make yourself better. And one of the things I like to focus on too, is it's not just my financial health, but my mental health and my physical health as well. I think that's all, those are the three components you need to have a happy life, right?
Yes.
Your mental health, your physical health, and your financial health. And part of the mental health too is also spiritual health, right? So those kind of go hand in hand, but you have to have all of that, right? If you don't have all three, it makes it very difficult. And I'm not saying that the financial part is that like money will buy you happiness, because it really does. But what money does get you is time, right? And it gets you that time back, and that can be significant.
Yes.
Towards the other things, right? Because if you get your time back, you have more time to do stuff to take care of your physical health. You have more time to take care of your mental health. So it kind of all starts with that finance piece, right? That's one of the most important parts. And I'm not saying that money has to be the be all end all, but it should be a very significant thing that you consider when you're trying to figure out your life.
Because unfortunately, I think it's the society. I guess it depends on who you listen to, but you would often hear money is the root of all evil. But that's not true. It's not true, but it's something that people would use to justify whatever lack they have. Because it's like, yeah, money is the root of all evil, or money is not going to buy you happiness, but it's going to get you back time, which then you can afford to do other things which make you happy. So in a sense, it kind of, not directly, it's really up there.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with that. So Awesome, Ida. So, okay, we've had an amazing conversation. I was absolutely thrilled to talk with you today. This has been so fun. And, just to really just open up and get back to the basics of why financial literacy is important, and what you're doing, with your coaching services and your podcast, and just helping out, your community in general is just super commendable. I absolutely mean that. You're doing amazing things, Ida. So I just want to say again, thank you for that. Now, for the people that are listening to the show right now, they're probably like, hey, I want to know more about Ida and what she's doing. So where can they find that information about you? Do you have a website you can share with us today, social media, and of course, your podcast, because we all want to know why we're broke.
So my website it's just my name, idaazefor.com. So IDAAZEFOR.com. Those days I'm much more on Instagram. So on Instagram and Facebook, I do have the same name. So it's Ida Azefor.financial coaching. Ida Azefor.financial coaching. That's where you're going to find me both on Instagram and on Facebook. And I'm very responsive to all my messages. And then the podcast, it's The Reason You're Broke. And it's available on all major platforms. So Apple, Google, Spotify, and a lot of other places. So pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts, you would find The Reason You're Broke.
Right on. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so for those of you that are listening, that's where you can go find her. I'll make sure we have all those links in the show notes below to make it easy for you. And if you're driving, don't sit here and try to go visit those sites right now. Wait till you get to your destination and go copy it down for later. But it's going to be in the show notes, so it's easy to find. And yeah, Ida, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love that we connected, and I would love to stay connected with you because this has just been really fun. And I'm truly humbled that you took the time to come on my show and have this chat with me and our audience today. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me. I want to go as far as I can to get my message to as many people in my community as possible. So thank you for offering me the opportunity to do so on your platform.
Absolutely. Of course. And you are always welcome here anytime. Just reach out and you can come on the show again, because this is the type of conversation I absolutely love having. So, all right, we're going to get out of here and sign off. But again, Ida, thank you again so much for coming on and chat with us today. And aloha from Hawaii.
In Montreal, au revoir.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.